Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today we've got some really thought-provoking sources lined up, and we're going to be taking a look at how art influences us.
Yeah, it should be an interesting one. I mean, art, it's everywhere, right? But have we ever really stopped to think about, its deeper impact? You know, how it shapes our thoughts, our feelings, even our actions?
Exactly. And one of the sources you sent over that really caught my eye was Plato's Republic. You know, the ancient Greek philosopher?
Yes, Plato.
Yeah, he had some pretty strong opinions about art, right? Didn't quite see eye to eye with a lot of artists of his day.
Oh, yeah, he definitely raised some eyebrows. You know, we often think of art as this beautiful, inspiring thing, and sure, it can be. But Plato, well, he had some serious concerns about its potential downsides.
Downsides. Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Lay it on me. What kind of downsides are we talking about here?
Well, he believed that art primarily appeals to our emotions, which isn't always a bad thing.
Right, of course.
But he argued that it often comes at the expense of reason and logic.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's going with this. So you're saying that something like watching a movie or listening to a song can actually make us less rational.
That was his concern. He believed that if we let our emotions run wild, especially those stirred up by certain types of art, it could cloud our judgment.
So it's like we're letting those feelings, those gut reactions, dictate our actions instead of thinking things through logically.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Plato worried that this could lead to some pretty bad decisions, actions that we might regret later.
I see what you mean. I mean, haven't we all been there? You know, getting swept up in a movie or a book and almost forgetting that it's not real life.
That's exactly the kind of thing Plato was talking about, that blurring of lines between fiction and reality. He was concerned that if we're constantly bombarded with images and stories that appeal to our emotions, it could make it harder to see the world clearly and make decisions based on logic and reason.
Okay, so you're saying that art can basically mess with our heads a bit.
Yeah.
Make us more impulsive, less rational.
You could say that he was especially worried about art that depicted immoral behavior. Violence, deceit, all that stuff.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, if we're constantly seeing those kinds of things portrayed in art, could it desensitize us to it?
That was his fear. He felt that art could either make us more tolerant of bad behavior or even worse, make it seem glamorous or exciting.
It's almost like we start to think that those negative behaviors are normal or even desirable.
Exactly. And imagine the impact this could have on young minds, those who are still developing their moral compass.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a scary thought. So you're saying that exposure to certain types of art could actually influence people to act immorally themselves?
Plato certainly thought it was a possibility.
So what was his solution? Did he think we could just ban all art, like live in some kind of sterile world devoid of creativity and expression?
Well, he did propose a pretty radical idea. He envisioned a society where art was carefully curated, to promote virtue and truth.
Curated art, like some kind of philosopher king deciding what we can and cannot see, hear, or read.
In his ideal city, every piece of art, from music to poetry to sculpture, would have to pass a moral purity test.
A moral purity test. Wow, that sounds pretty intense. I mean, wouldn't that stifle artistic freedom? Like, who gets to decide what's morally pure anyway?
Those are definitely valid concerns, and we'll delve deeper into those questions in just a bit.
Okay, because this is getting really interesting. I'm starting to see that while Plato's ideas might seem extreme on the surface, there's definitely some food for thought there. It makes you wonder about the power of art and the responsibility that comes with creating it and consuming it.
Absolutely. And I think that's what makes Plato's perspective so valuable even thousands of years later. It challenges us to think critically about the role of art in our lives and to be mindful of its potential impact.
Okay, so we've talked about the downsides of art according to Plato. But let's be honest here. Art isn't all bad, right?
Oh, definitely not. In fact, Plato himself acknowledged that certain kinds of emotions, those inspired by art, could actually be beneficial. He just believed that the key was balance.
Okay, balance. So how do we strike that balance? How do we enjoy art without letting it completely hijack our emotions and morality?
Well, that's where things get really interesting, and we'll explore that further after a quick break. So where were we?
Right. Balance. We were talking about how to find that sweet spot, enjoying art without letting it totally take over our emotions.
Ah, yes, balance. It's kind of like walking a tightrope, isn't it? You need to find that perfect center.
Exactly. So how do we do that? Where do we even begin?
Well, I think it starts with awareness. Being mindful of how different forms of art actually affect us.
Okay. So like paying attention to how we feel when we're watching a movie or listening to music.
Exactly. Do you ever notice how certain genres of music can make you feel anxious or agitated? Or how some movies leave you feeling drained or depressed.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I know I can't watch too many true crime documentaries before I start looking over my shoulder everywhere I go.
I know the feeling. It's like all that negativity starts to seep into your real life.
Exactly. It's like my mood just takes a nosedive and I start seeing the world through this dark lens.
That's exactly what we need to pay attention to, those subtle shifts in our mood and energy. Once we start recognizing those patterns, we can make more intentional choices about the art we choose to engage with.
So it's kind of like being mindful of what we eat, choosing nourishing foods instead of junk food that might taste good in the moment, but leaves us feeling sluggish and unhealthy.
That's a great analogy. Just like we wouldn't eat fast food every day, we shouldn't fill our minds with only art that offers instant gratification but lacks substance.
So we need a balanced artistic diet, something that nourishes our minds and souls.
Exactly. One that includes works that challenge us, inspire us, and help us grow art that makes us think, feel, and see the world in new ways.
I love that. A balanced artistic diet. I'm going to start using that. But you know what? Sometimes you just want to relax and unwind with something light and entertaining. Does Plato think that's off limits too?
I don't think so. I think even Plato recognized the importance of pleasure and entertainment. He just cautioned against excessive indulgence in certain types of art.
Okay, so moderation is key, like enjoying a delicious dessert every now and then, but not making it a daily habit.
Precisely. It's about finding that balance, indulging in those guilty pleasures every once in a while, but also making sure we're feeding our minds with art that's both enjoyable and enriching.
It all comes back to balance, doesn't it?
It always does. And remember, it's not just about the content of the art itself, but also the context in which we experience it.
What do you mean by that?
Well, are we passively absorbing whatever's on the screen, or are we actively engaging with the material? Are we discussing it with friends, reflecting on its themes, and considering its impact on our own thoughts and feelings?
You know, that's such a good point. I've definitely had much richer experiences with art when I've taken the time to really dig into it. You know, to think critically about what it's trying to say and to discuss it with others who have different perspectives. It's those deeper conversations that make the experience truly meaningful.
Exactly. It's like the difference between passively scrolling through social media and having a deep, meaningful conversation with a close friend. The level of engagement, the depth of connection, and the lasting impact are completely different.
So it's about being an active participant in our artistic experiences, not just a passive consumer.
Precisely. We have so much power to shape our own artistic journeys. We're not just helpless victims of whatever's out there. We can actively seek out art that inspires us, challenges us, and aligns with our values.
This is making me realize how much agency we actually have.
Yeah.
You know, we're not just sitting ducks. We have choices. We can curate our own artistic experiences.
Exactly. We have this incredible world of artistic possibility at our fingertips, just waiting to be explored. And with a bit of intentionality and discernment, we can create an artistic landscape for ourselves that is both enriching and fulfilling.
I love that. It's so empowering. But, you know, all this talk of choice and intentionality makes me wonder, what would Plato think of our modern world?
Yeah.
You know, with the internet and social media.
Oh, that's a fascinating question. Imagine Plato trying to navigate our digital age. The sheer volume of content, the constant stimulation, the endless stream of images and information. It's mind-boggling.
Would he just throw his hands up in despair, declare the internet a lost cause, and retreat to a cave somewhere?
Who knows? But it's definitely something worth exploring. How would Plato's ideas about art and its influence apply to our current media landscape?
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. Let's dive into that. Okay, so we're back. And we're trying to picture Plato navigating our modern world, you know, with all the technology and the constant flow of information. It's pretty wild to imagine.
Yeah, can you imagine the ancient Greek philosopher scrolling through TikTok or trying to figure out what a meme is? It'd be quite a sight.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But seriously, though, all jokes aside, I'm genuinely curious about how his ideas about art would hold up in today's world. You know, with the internet and social media and everything, it's a completely different landscape than what he was used to.
Yeah, I mean, in Plato's time, art was pretty much limited to live performances, sculptures, paintings, things like that. But now, it's everywhere. It's on our phones, our computers, our TVs. It's constantly vying for our attention.
Exactly. And it's not just the quantity of art that's different. It's the way it's presented, too.
Yeah.
You know, with all the filters and editing and carefully constructed online personas, it's hard to know what's real and what's not.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, Plato was already concerned about art's ability to distort reality. But imagine what he'd think of the internet, where people can curate these perfect, idealized versions of themselves and their lives.
It's like that saying, right? Don't compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel.
Exactly. And I think that's where Plato's emphasis on reason and critical thinking becomes even more important. We can't just passively absorb everything we see online. We need to question things, analyze them, and form our own opinions.
So it's like we need to develop a kind of digital literacy, a way of navigating this online world with discernment and a healthy dose of skepticism.
Absolutely. We need to be able to filter through all the noise and identify the messages that are worth paying attention to, the ones that align with our values and help us grow.
And I think that ties back to what we were talking about earlier, about taking responsibility for our own artistic experiences. We have the power to choose what we consume, what we engage with, and what we let influence us.
Exactly. We're not just helpless victims of the algorithm. We can actively seek out art that inspires us, challenges us, and broadens our horizons.
And the amazing thing is with the internet, we have access to a wider variety of art than ever before. We can explore different cultures, different time periods, different perspectives. It's truly incredible.
It's like having a global art museum right at our fingertips. And I think Plato would appreciate that. His idea of an ideal society was one where knowledge and beauty were valued and accessible to all.
That's a good point. So maybe instead of being horrified by the internet, Plato would see it as an opportunity, a way to spread knowledge and understanding across the globe.
It's definitely possible. I mean, the internet has its downsides for sure. But it also has the potential to connect people, foster empathy, and promote cross-cultural dialogue.
And that's something worth celebrating, I think.
Yeah.
This idea that art can transcend borders and bring people together.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder of the universality of human experience. Regardless of our differences, we all share these fundamental emotions and desires. And art has a way of tapping into that shared humanity.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. I came into this thinking we were just going to be talking about Plato's ideas about art, but it's turned into so much more than that. It's really made me think about the role of art in our lives and the power it has to shape our thoughts, feelings, and actions.
Yeah, me too. And I think that's the beauty of philosophy, right? It's not just about memorizing theories or arguments. It's about using those ideas as a springboard for deeper reflection and self-discovery.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a question. What role does art play in your life? How does it influence you? And how can you use it to make your life and the world around you a little bit better, a little bit brighter, a little bit more beautiful? Thanks for joining us on this journey. It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
And remember, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep letting art inspire you.
Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with your friends, and leave us a review. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.